gravel road ended abruptly at the edge of the trees, opening into a wide clearing where the house stood waiting. Their electric car slowed as it rolled up the long driveway, tires crunching over loose stone. Sage Morales watched the structure rise through the windshield, tall, pale, and overly still, like it had been holding its breath for years. It was bigger than the photo suggested, too big for a weekend rental. Diego Alvarez smiled anyway. "For once," he said, leaning back in his seat, "a place that feels like it could hold a story." Sage didn't answer right away. She was already cataloguing details, the way the windows reflected the lake instead of the sky, the absence of any nearby houses, the fact that her phone signal had dropped to one wavering bar. She told herself she was overthinking. She always did. This weekend mattered. She had taken on the brutal editing contract for a reason. Late nights, missed dinners, constant deadlines. She had done it all so Diego could finally write without fear, without checking his bank balance every morning. This trip was supposed to mark that shift, proof that they were steady, that they were moving forward. Especially after what she'd done, Diego cut the engine, reached into his jacket pocket, and brushed his fingers against the small velvet box hidden there. His grandmother's ring pressed reassuringly against his palm. He imagined asking Sage by the water, imagined her laughing first, crying second. Permanence frightened him, but not as much as losing her. They stepped out of the car together. That was when the front door opened. A couple stood on the porch, framed neatly by the doorway, as if they'd been waiting for them. "Hey," the man said, lifting a hand in a casual wave. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the easy confidence of someone used to being liked. "You must be Sage and Diego." Sage felt the first flicker of unease. The woman beside him smiled wider than necessary. Short hair, carefully styled. Bright eyes that didn't quite settle. She leaned against the railing like she was already at home. "I'm Sin," she said. "This is Will." They had booked the house too. Maps were checked. Emails pulled up. Dates confirmed. No one was wrong. The air tightened, thick with the expectation of conflict, but it never arrived. Will laughed it off, scratching the back of his neck like a college kid caught sneaking into the wrong dorm. "This place is massive," he said. "Feels silly not to use it. We can share. Make it a thing." Sin clapped her hands. "Like strangers in a movie." Sage hesitated. She noticed how quickly the tension evaporated, how smoothly the suggestion landed. She noticed how Diego's shoulders relaxed at the idea of company, of not being alone in such a large, quiet place. Against her better judgment, she nodded. The house swallowed them whole. Bone Lake glittered under the afternoon sun, deceptively calm. The water was cold, clean, inviting. From a distance, it looked like every other vacation lake Sage had ever seen. Up close, it felt different. They swam, they drank, they floated, and let the hours pass. Laughter echoed across the surface. That was when Will started talking. "Did you know," he said, treading water effortlessly, "they found bodies here? Not all at once, over decades." Sin floated on her back, eyes closed, smiling like she'd heard it all before. Will kept going. He talked about the 50s, about disappearances, about how some people believed a serial killer used the lake because the water was deep enough to keep secrets. He talked too easily, too precisely, like he'd memorized it. "There's a woman in town," he added, "keeps journals, writes everything down, says nothing should be forgotten." Sage felt a chill crawl up her spine that had nothing to do with the water. Dinner came later. Wine helped. The story faded into background noise, filed away somewhere behind logic and appetite. But something shifted after sunset. Sin sat too close to Diego, laughing at things that weren't jokes. Her hand brushed his arm and didn't move away. She asked about his writing, leaned into his answers, told him he had sad eyes, the kind that meant depth. Will did the opposite. He hovered near Sage, asked about her job, complimented her discipline, told her she seemed like someone who held things together when others couldn't. His attention felt deliberate, like pressure applied slowly. Sage smiled. She always smiled. Then came the locked doors. "Isn't it weird?" Sin said, running her fingers along a hallway wall. "All these rooms we can't go into." Will grinned. "Feels like a waste." They found the first key hidden behind a vent. Inside, leather, chains, a suspended swing bolted into the ceiling. Everything clean, everything intentional. The room smelled faintly of oil and disinfectant. No one laughed. The second room was worse. A Ouija board sat on a small table, its surface scratched and worn. The walls were lined with newspaper clippings, missing persons, drownings, unsolved cases. dates spanning decades, faces staring out from yellowed paper. Sage stepped closer. The clippings were preserved carefully, sleeved, categorized. This wasn't curiosity, this was curation. The house shifted in her mind then, from rental to something else, something owned. She thought of the woman Will had mentioned, the one who remembered things for others. Behind her, Diego swallowed hard. What none of them knew was that earlier that afternoon, while bags were unpacked and doors were left open, Will had found the ring. He had turned it over in his fingers, smiled once, and slipped it into his pocket. That night, Sage lay awake listening to the house settle around them. The walls creaked. The lake lapped faintly in the distance. Beside her, Diego stared at the ceiling, rehearsing a question he no longer felt sure he should ask. Down the hall, Thomas and Alice Price lay in their childhood bedrooms, already rewriting the story of the people they'd invited in. The test had begun. Morning didn't soften the house. Light poured through the tall windows, pale and sharp, making everything look overexposed, like a crime scene photographed too early. Sage sat at the kitchen table with a mug gone cold in her hands, listening to the quiet stretch too long between movements. The house felt awake before they were. Diego barely touched his food. He kept glancing toward the hallway, as if something might step out of it. Will broke the silence. He stood suddenly, cleared his throat, and dropped to one knee with theatrical flair. Sin gasped, hands flying to her mouth, already halfway into the performance. Sage, Diego, this feels right, Will said, voice shaking just enough to sound sincere. He reached into his pocket and opened a small velvet box. Sage knew the ring before her mind caught up. Gold, thin band, the faint engraving on the inside. Diego's grandmother's ring. The room tilted. Sin shrieked and jumped into Will's arms. Yes! Yes! Obviously yes! Diego's chair scraped loudly against the floor as he stood. Color drained from his face, leaving him hollow-eyed, frozen between disbelief and something darker. Sage watched Will closely. He didn't look surprised by Diego's reaction. He looked curious. Later, Diego cornered him in the mudroom. Sage stayed in the kitchen, heart pounding, every nerve tuned to the muffled sound of voices behind the door. Will emerged alone a few minutes later, rubbing his face like a man coming undone. He's having a rough time, Will said quietly, not meeting Sage's eyes. I messed up. Diego returned soon after, eyes red, jaw clenched. He told Sage what Will had said, that Sin was cheating, that the proposal was a desperate move, that he'd taken the ring without thinking, because when you're afraid of losing someone, you do stupid things. Diego believed him. He always believed people when they sounded broken enough. Sage said nothing, but something inside her hardened. The grocery trip was Will's idea. Let's get out of here for a bit, he said lightly. Reset, Sage agreed, though every instinct told her not to get into that car. The drive wound along the lake, trees pressing close on either side. Will talked easily at first. About the town, the weather, nothing at all. Then, without warning, his tone shifted. Diego told me something, he said. Sage kept her eyes on the road. He said he walked in on you once, in the tub. Her grip tightened on the steering wheel. Said it messed with him, Will continued. Made him wonder if he was enough. Sage felt heat rise in her chest. Not shame, but anger. Sharp, focused. Will glanced at her, just long enough to gauge the damage. I mean, I get it. You're intense. You probably need more than he can give. He let the words sit between them. Then his hand moved. Sage braked so hard the car lurched. Get your hand off me, she said calmly. Will smiled unbothered. Just testing the temperature. Something clicked into place then. Not fear, not panic, but clarity. This wasn't chaos. It was choreography. Back at the house, Sin tried her own version. She drifted into Diego's space like it was accidental, like gravity had pulled her there. She praised his writing, touched his shoulder, told him Sage didn't understand him the way she did. Diego stared past her, listening without hearing. The house felt smaller as night fell. The lake outside reflected nothing but darkness. Sin produced a small plastic bag with a grin. Molly, she said. Let's loosen things up. Sage smiled and nodded and pretended. Later, in the bedroom, Sage told Diego the truth, that she hadn't taken anything, that she hadn't lost control. The relief on his face was immediate. That's what they want, he said slowly. Isn't it? Sage nodded. They already know where to hit us. They didn't argue. They packed. The car waited like a promise until Diego opened the charging port. Empty. The battery indicator glowed mercilessly low. Gravel crunched behind them. Will stood in the headlights. No smile this time. Just certainty. You should know, he said casually. Sage and I already hooked up today. The lie was delivered cleanly. Don't, Sage shouted. He's lying. Diego didn't look at Will again. He threw the car into reverse. Headlights flared from the side. Metal screamed. The impact snapped the world sideways. As darkness rushed in, Sage understood one final thing. They were never meant to leave. Sage woke to pain before awareness. Something bit into her wrists. Her shoulders burned. The air smelled wrong. Stale, metallic, familiar in a way she didn't like. When her eyes finally focused, the room came into view in broken pieces. The stone fireplace, the mounted antlers, the heavy wooden beams overhead. Duct tape. Her arms were bound to a chair, so were Diego's. Across from them, Will and Sin stood side by side, no longer bothering to sit, no longer pretending to be anything but what they were. Names first, Will said, almost politely. It feels disrespectful not to use them. Sin tilted her head, watching Sage like a mirror watching its reflection. I'm Alice, she said. This is my brother Thomas. The words settled slowly, like dust. They spoke without urgency, without excitement, as if this conversation had been rehearsed many times before. Their parents, they explained, had built the house. Publishing money, old money, quiet money. When the truth came out, what the siblings were to each other, the house had become a cage. When the parents threatened exposure, the solution had felt obvious. Bone Lake had already taught them how well bodies disappeared. This is number 7, Alice said, gesturing lightly towards Sage and Diego. You made it further than most. Thomas smiled at Diego. You talk too much when you want to be liked. Diego flinched. Thomas repeated the things he'd been told. About the cheating, about the fear, about the ring. Each word was placed carefully, meant to cut without drawing blood. Sage stopped listening to their voices. She was watching the floor. Near her foot lay a shard of glass, thin and sharp, almost invisible against the stone. When Alice stepped closer with the knife, Sage moved. She sliced through the tape, stood, and struck. Glass met skin, blood bloomed. Alice screamed, high, furious, animal. The room exploded into motion. Sage ran. She grabbed the first thing that made sense, a wood-splitting axe leaning against the mudroom wall. Its weight steadied her, made her reel again. Thomas stepped into the hallway, calm as ever. Go on, he said. Let's see what you're capable of. She hesitated. That was enough. He took the axe from her with terrifying ease. Outside, Diego ran. He didn't think. He moved. The dock loomed ahead, dark and narrow. He slid into the freezing water, lungs burning as he disappeared beneath the planks. Alice followed, bleeding, screaming his name like a curse. He found the spike by touch and drove it through her foot when she reached the edge. She howled. Then the chainsaw roared. Thomas. Sage came from behind. One swing, silence. The boat shuddered as they pulled away. Alice lunged, grabbed the side, refused to let go. Diego swung. Fingers fell. Hair caught. Sage reversed the engine. The lake swallowed the sound. Dawn broke gently, as if nothing had happened. The boat drifted, empty water in every direction. Diego noticed the finger near his foot, the ring still on it. He picked it up, hands shaking, and slipped the ring free. He didn't kneel. He didn't rehearse. Marry me, he said simply. Sage laughed. Then she cried. Then they laughed again, until there was nothing left. The lake stayed quiet, as it always had.